Alright, so object-oriented programming is a concept that uses reusable pieces of code, such as classes, to create objects to help structure our application. So in this video, I'm going to be going over how to create a class and an object in Python. So let's get started. So we can think of a class as a blueprint that describes what we're trying to create. I thought the most easy thing to think about when using a blueprint is a house, apartment, things like that requires the reusability of it. So you know that if you have a blueprint, you're able to rebuild that object as many times as you want. You may make subtle changes, but at least you have a foundation, a blueprint to actually create whatever you're trying to create. And when you actually create it using that blueprint, you actually now have an object. Each time you use the blueprint, you're creating an object, and even if you use it multiple times, each object is different. So that's how I like to view it when I'm using or creating a class in whatever language that I choose, because this concept of object-oriented programming is not just restricted to Python, but in other very famous languages like JavaScript, C++, Java, and Python. It's everywhere. Alright, so let's define a blueprint or a class for a house. I already created the house.py file in Visual Studio Code, and you can use whatever editor that you want, but I think it's good convention to create a file that has the name of the blueprint that we're gonna create. So to create a class in Python, all you have to do is use the keyword class and then the name that we actually want to define for the blueprint or the class. So in this case, I want to create a house, and by convention I usually use a capital for the first letter in the actual class name. That's good convention, right? That's great convention, so I would advise doing that. Then use a colon to end out that line, and then we're not going to define any attributes and stuff yet. We're going to use the pass keyword just to let Python know that this is where we're going to end, but we didn't really define anything yet within this blueprint. So this is how you create a very bare bones class or blueprint in Python. So now let's create an instance. So let's create the object for the house. So let's actually define or actually create an object. So let's have a variable, or let's create a variable, and I'm going to call this a house, but I'm going to use lowercase h. I'm going to set that equal to, and then let's use the actual name of the blueprint or the class that we just created, which is house. And let's open up some parentheses, and then boom. So now we have an instance of a house, which is an object. So now we have a house object that's stored in this house variable. And if we print this out just to prove what I was saying, and save that, and let me just do a Python 3 and then the file, you can see boom, now you see house object at, and it's the memory location where this is actually being held. And remember what I said, where this is a blueprint that can be reused, and just because we use the same blueprints many times, it creates new versions of that object that we're defining. So let's create another variable called house2, and we're going to use the same blueprint, house, and let's print this out, and let's print a house2. Right, so we're using the same blueprint, but just using a different variable. And let me just clear this out so it doesn't get anyone confused. And then I'm going to do Python 3 house.py. As you can see, there is two objects, yes, and they're both house objects, but it's different locations in memory, because it's two different instances of the object. Yeah, we're using the same blueprint, but it's different versions of the object, different objects. So just like look on your street, yes, you probably have two houses that look exactly the same, but they're in two different locations, right? They use the same blueprints, but they're two different things. So that's the cool thing about classes or OOP in general, is the fact that yes, everything becomes reusable, but different at the same time. And as we start to dive more into it, you'll see for big applications, you'll see how useful that is. Alright, so cool. So let's start defining some things within this blueprint, right? Because a house is not just nothing. You know, a house has different attributes that defines what a house really is, what makes it unique. So it could be, you know, a bedroom, the amount of bedrooms, the amount of bathrooms, the color, the price. So let's start defining some of those attributes within this blueprint, right? So the first thing we're gonna do is create a function within this class, and any function within the class is called a method. So let's define a very important one called init. So let's do def underscore 2 underscores init, and then another 2 underscores, and then let's open up some parentheses, and then we're gonna close that out with a colon. So what this does, or what this init method is, it just, you can think of it as initialize, but or if you had some experience with any other programming language, this is what you would define as a constructor. So what makes it special is that this is the function that will be called when a house is created. It's going to be called right away, and this is what we use to initialize anything that we would need to be created when creating a house. So what makes this thing so amazing is that if we have some attributes that we need from the user right away, or from wherever it's retrieving the information from right away, this is where we'll define those parameters that will be needed for the house or any other class or object that you're creating. So in this case, we're creating a house, and we already defined some of the things that we may need when creating a house. We need the bathrooms, the bedrooms, the price, and the color. So let's start putting that in. So the first thing that we need to define in this parameters is self. And what this is pretty much an instance of itself. Like, this is going to be what Python passes in to reference the house itself, like to reference itself. And this is going to be important as we start to define more methods within this class of being able to retrieve what was initialized from the beginning in this init function, or in this init method, because now we can retrieve what we defined for itself. This doesn't have to be called self. It can be called whatever, but it's usually called self. So I'm just trying to follow the proper conventions that people usually use, so that everybody follows the same convention. So now after that, because since that's going to be the first thing that Python manually injects or automatically injects, we can start defining the parameters that we want. So I talked about bedrooms, I talked about bathrooms, I talked about color, and I talked about price. These are the 4 things that I believe will be needed for a proper house, right? So now, like I said before, if we want to assign these parameters to itself, or in this case to the house, we'll just use that self keyword, or that self parameter that we just retrieved right here. And now we're going to set it to be a variable name that we want to define for house, or for, in this case, for house. Yeah. So we want to define for itself bedroom. This can be any name, by the way, but I want to keep it to the same name as what we're passing the parameter. So in this case, I'm creating a variable that will be attached to the instance of a house. So I'm going to create a variable called bedroom, which is going to be attached to house, and I'm going to set that equal to whatever value that the user is going to send through the parameter. So in this case, they're going to pass bedroom. Remember, this can be anything. I could call this BR for short, so I can call it rooms. But just to make sure that I'm keeping it as close as possible, so it's not confusing to what exactly it is, I'm just going to call it exactly that, because Python know, like, okay, he's creating, or he or she is creating a variable that's going to belong to house, and it's going to be called bedroom, but what's being attached to it is this value right here that's being passed as a parameter to that class variable. So then we're going to do it for the rest. Let's do self dot, I can't spell today, bathrooms, and it's going to say that equals to bathrooms, and we're going to do self dot color, and then we're going to make that equal to color, and then last but not least, self dot price is equal to price. So now we just created 4 variables that will belong to the class of house, and we're initializing that, the value of these variables that's going to belong to house with the values that we're going to pass through the parameter. And so now when we create a house or instance of a house, if we pass in any parameter, so in this case you can already see when I hover over it, it's gonna it's gonna require these parameters that we defined up above. So I know I want to have a 4-bedroom house with 3 bathrooms. That's gonna be the color blue, very mellow, and then the price is gonna be let's reach for the stars. Let's make it 400,000. Right. So now, when we create this, right, we have an instance of a house, and now it's going to be stored in a bedroom variable, a bathrooms variable, a colors variable, and a prices variable. This is going to belong. Those variables are going to belong to those variables are attributes that will belong to the house. And now we can retrieve that by just doing some dot notation. So let's do dots, and now you can see that these variables are available to be retrieved and used. So in this case, let's print out bathrooms. So let's do a little prompt. The number of bathrooms are, and let's do string or str to make that into a string, because we defined it as 3. So if we try to print that out without making it a string, it's gonna cause some problems. And let's comment this out. And let me save this, and let me clear that out, and just do Python 3 house.py, and then boom, the number of bathrooms are 3. So that's awesome. So now we have an instance of a house, right? And we define attributes for this house so that we can retrieve it when we need to. So the cool thing about it is that now we can now create unique houses with different data, but it's still using the same blueprint. Like, imagine having to create or using this code repeatedly, like having to define this every single time, multiple times, whenever we need a house. That would be crazy, and it'll be a lot of lines of code. But now we have a blueprint that we can use that expects parameters to define this object, and now we can reuse it. You see the reusability of this to create objects just by defining the class. To me, that's awesome, and it saves a lot of time. So now we already have this house number 2 already handy, but like I said, we're in the same neighborhood, but and we're using the same blueprint, but we're just a little bit different. So I'm just gonna copy some of this, and I'm going to make this 2 bathrooms, because maybe they weren't lucky. Maybe the previous owner for the previous or the house next door added a bathroom because he didn't feel like walking to the bathroom on the other side of the house, so he added another bathroom close to the living room, right? So let's print that out, because this this person has 2, he doesn't have 3. So let's see if that actually takes place. Let's put actually no, yeah, let's print that out, and let me just do clear so that it's easier to see. And then boom. So let's see what's the issue here. Oh, that's already a mistake. I forgot to define house to house number 2. So that's a good mistake, because now we see that it was pointing to the first instance of house, but really right now we want to see the second instance that we created of house number 2. So let's save that, and let's clear that out, and let's remove the double print. Save it and run it, and then boom, the number of bathrooms are 3 as we expect from here, and the number of bathrooms here are 2. Awesome. So these are the attributes, and these are how we define attributes for a house, and we can see that they're different even though they're using the same blueprint. So another thing that's cool about a class is, like I said, whenever you create a function within a class, those are methods, and so we're going to define some methods for this house, right? So let's say all right, so let's define a prompt that a real estate agent or maybe Zillow can use to see some of the properties of the house that was defined using that blueprint or the instance of the house, right? So let's do def Zillow prompt, and let's open that up, and the only parameter that we'll need is self, which, like I said before, self is just a parameter that is going to be injected automatically by Python, and this is just the instance of itself. So even when we use self dot, we'll be able to grab attributes that was defined for a house, and even if we wanted to call other method that were created, we could do that. Obviously you don't want to call zillow.prompt, that would cause problems, but you can grab variables, which we will because we're creating a prompt. So let's do a quick print, and let's do and actually let me just make this easier, make this quicker. I already defined a prompt, so let me just copy it over. Boom. So all this prompt is going to say is this house includes the number of bedrooms and bathrooms, and yeah, that's pretty much it. And if you want to add more, like let's say you want to add, I don't want to make it too long, but if you want to add color, you could, and price as well. And actually we can just define some more methods, and let's print out the price. So let's do price of house, and we're just going to pass self because we need to, and then let's print out the price of the house is, and then we can do string, and then we can do self dot price. This is just turning the price into a string, and then we're just concatenating it. And let's do the color as well. So as you can see, it's the same logic. If you want to create a method within a class, all you got to do is just use def to just like how you would create a function. It's really just a function within a class. That's just what a method is. So we can do color of house, and then so just the color of the house is, and since color is already a string, we can just do self.color here. And now we can just do, let's change this to red, right? And then now we can just do and since it's already using a print, we don't need to use another print. So we could just do just take the instance of the house, which is called house, use dot, and then do a Zillow prompt. And since this self is being injected by Python itself, we don't have to do that. There is no parameters that are needed in this case, and then we can do a house dot color of house, and we could do, and then we gotta open up the parentheses and then do house dot price of house, and we'll have to do the same thing for the second house, just so that we can see that we're grabbing the proper instance of the house, which obviously we are. But make sure you change that to 2 or whatever you're naming the other instance, and then we should just be good to go. And just change the price just to make it, and let's clear this out. And then so we already made a mistake. Did you mean bathrooms? Yes, I did. Forgot the S. Alright, so let's do a clear. Run that again. So for house number 1, we see the house includes 4 bedrooms and 3 bathrooms, and the color is blue, and the price is as expected. And then the number of bathrooms for the second house is 2. 4 bedrooms, 2 bathrooms, is red, and the price is as expected. So you can see how useful classes and objects are in any language, but in this case Python. It just allows us to reuse code, and all we have to do is change the instance that it's pointing to. So if we wanted to get the first house, we just use house, but if we want to get the second house, we just use house number 2. But it's calling the same method that we use in our blueprint to help us define or print out a prompt that we created, or whatever case or whatever functionality that we have within this method. So that is object-oriented programming. That's a very important concept in object-oriented programming. And the next concept we'll go over is inheritance.